Hi Hairbrained, it's Morgan Roy and I'm here with my model. This is Sydney, and today I'm going to show you how to cut a modern mullet. So to start, I'm just going to show you the sectioning that I've already planned out on Sydney's hair. And Sydney already has a little bit of mullet going on, but it's been about 3 months since her last haircut. So what I've done underneath is I've sectioned off where I want to retain all of Sydney's length. So that has just been braided away so that when I clip it down, I don't have to worry with too many clip marks. And then along the parietal ridge, I have more sectioning, and I'm clipped a little higher up on the parietal ridge. And this is so that I can really sort of take down the sides nice and tight. So I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna start at center back, and I'm just gonna have Sydney look down ever so slightly. And when I look at Sydney's head shape, and I think this is important for us to be doing, is I like to see if it's important to build up any volume in the crown. And with Sydney, she's quite petite, so we can definitely do something that's going to exaggerate the head shape a little bit and also give her a little bit of height. So one of my favorite techniques to use in a haircut is graduation. And whenever I need to get myself centered, especially in a scenario like today, I always feel for the back of the head where the ears are. And then that way I find it's a lot easier to find center back on the head. And I'm very excited to be doing another Hairbrained Live. And I'm hoping that there'll be people tuning in and you can go ahead and ask questions. One of the places that I like to go to for inspiration is I love, well, Hairbrained obviously, but then I also love to look to the runway. So here I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to graduate. So this will really be the shortest place on Sydney's haircut. And I'm going to build in a little bit of a weight line through graduation. And I've got my good friend Tristan Morrison behind the camera tonight. So if you have any questions, my good buddy here is gonna read them off to me.
So lots of people tuning in and lots of love out there from Brooklyn, from all over the US. A lot of hearts and thanks for being here to you, Morgan. So good stuff.
Nice, and I am at the Toronto Aveda Institute and Academy. We just finished up our day here. So it's nice to continue some education for those at home that might not be able to make it to Toronto, but you're always welcome. You can come visit me here, or I also work at Chiavello. And Ray Chiavello was on one of these Hairbraineds not too long ago, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure to. So I'm over-directing to the previous section, and what this is going to do is it's going to build up a little bit of weight behind Sydney's ear. Because what can happen when we cut mullets is they can tend to get a little too small on top, and then we have too much volume through the bottom. So what this is going to do is it's just going to build up that little bit of graduation and give the round of the head a little more shape. The other reason why you see me sort of stop and check to look at my work, it's because to me, hair cutting has some similarities to driving. And when we're taught to drive, people will tell us you need to go straight. But if we were to just hold the steering wheel straight, we would crash. Because it's important when we're driving to kind of move with the road. And so the same is true when I'm cutting hair. I like to stop and check to make sure that what I'm creating is actually working with what I'm trying to create. So I'm gonna actually stop there because as I was saying, I wanna make sure that I'm building up a little bit of weight just behind Sydney's ear. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do the same thing on the opposite side, just spinning around Sydney.
So a lot of great questions. What would you describe as a modern mullet?
So great question, and I was having this debate earlier today because I was wanting to know, like, what's the difference between a mullet and a shag? Because I have a tendency to use the word shag because for me, a mullet kind of has, well, being up in Canada, I think of hockey hair, and you kind of would be like, oh, that person has a mullet. But then, you think of people like David Bowie, and he had a mullet, and it was amazing. So I don't think we kind of have the same sort of negative feelings around a mullet anymore. But to talk about inspiration, like my favorite source of inspiration is I love the Vogue Runway app. And it posts all of the collections, including the latest collection that was done in Tokyo for Valentino. And if you looked at a lot of the models' hair, there was a strong sort of mullet influence, where a lot of the models, both men and women, had quite cropped on top and then a lot of length through the ends. So I think in order to make something modern, it's important to think of the person that's going to be wearing it. So for Sydney, this isn't her first mullet. She definitely loves having haircuts that really stand out. So I think it's really about incorporating the fashion piece. That's what makes mullet modern. We're not talking about someone that has a Flowbee and they've decided to cut their hair at home and by accident they get a mullet. I'm talking about people that really are thinking about their image. And as hairstylists, I think it's important for us to also look and consider our guest's image.
So we've got lots of love coming in. We got so many people watching. We had Adam Federico watching. So hey Adam. We have a lot of people asking, why are you cutting on the inside of your hands versus over top of your knuckles?
Very good question. So I like to cut on the inside of my hand for two reasons. The inside of my hand is a lot flatter, so it's easier for me to cut flatter shapes when I'm on the inside of my hand. When I work over my fingers have a tendency to curve to what I'm cutting to. The other reason is for body. I want to be a hairdresser for 100 years. Well, I want to live to 100, but maybe I can do hair until I'm 80. At some point, I'll become a thin hair specialist, so I don't have to do the blow dries. But when I'm in a cutting position for graduation, like Tristan, if you want to back up a little, you can see I'm going to lunge. And by working palm to palm, I'm lowering myself down. My shoulders are relaxed, my knee is in the same line as my foot, so there's no pressure on my body. If anything, I'm getting a bit of a workout, which is great. So when I go to my second side and I slide my foot over, the same thing happens where now I get to lunge down again, and there's no pressure on my shoulder. So I really think for the health of the hairdresser, it's important to consider not only your hand position, but your body position.
So we got a lot of people that tuned in, so what are you doing right now?
Let me recap. So I've just pulled out the section that I had pre-sectioned off of Sydney's haircut for this modern mullet. And above that, I did a little bit of triangular graduation. So graduation being something that sits shorter to longer on top, and triangular meaning my starting point is at the back, and it's progressively going to get longer towards the sides. And along the way, I made sure that I liked the way that this was sitting in. From here, I'm going to go into the side, because there is a bit of disconnection from side to side. And as I told you previously, Sydney already had a little bit of pre-cut areas, and I'm going to go back to that afterwards. But I'm going to go in with now something that starts at the front, and I'm going to work towards the back. And what this is going to do is it's going to push the hair back and away from Sydney's face. But because I have this piece at the back, it's almost going to intersect and kind of just push over the shoulder. So for this, I'm going to do a layering technique, and Sydney's going to help me out by just tipping her head ever so slightly to the side. And I'm going to comb away from me and work very short And why she's got her head tipped is because with my cutting hand, it's very hard to get my hand nice and close to her head. Just making sure I have the right length there.
So we got lots of love coming in. We got some love coming in from our friend Leslie Spencer. Hey Leslie, how's it going? A lot of people saying that they would love you to come back and do work at the salon. One question just came in from Louisa. Would you recommend this kind of haircut on thicker hair?
So good question, Louisa, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I feel like with any haircut, it's really important to do a proper consultation. So I'm hesitant to say who this is going to be perfect for, because I think anything when it's been customized well works for everybody. It's almost like restaurants. I don't think any restaurant is going to turn you away anymore because they all know the importance of customization. Like if I want to go eat with, a vegan that's gluten-free and can't have any nuts, most restaurants are going to accommodate for that now. And so I think with hairdressing, when we understand our technique, we can go ahead and customize something so well that yes, suitability-wise, this could work for anybody.
So a couple people that have just kind of tuned in, so why don't you just kind of recap what kind of haircut you're doing and who you are, and happy that everybody's joining in with Hairbrained.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm Morgan Roy. I'm creative director here at the Aveda Institute Toronto, as well as the Chiavello Salon Group. And I've just been cutting away on Sydney's hair today. And we're doing what I'm calling a modern mullet, inspired by all of the beautiful runway models for this year's spring-summer collections. And what I'm doing in here is I'm working basically a round concave. And why we say round is that I'm starting at the front, and the weight of this is going to slowly push to the back. And concave because I'm really cutting a layer that is so high that it would almost be like the inside of a circle. And you can see that I'm doing that with my hand. So I'm just combing away. And Sydney, she's even helping me out by having her head slightly tipped to the side. So Sydney, you let me know if you get tired, okay?
Mm-hmm. So Chantal wants to know if you're using a cutting aid or a lotion.
Oh, so hi Chantal, thank you so much for your question. No, today I'm not using a cutting aid or a lotion. I just have water in Sydney's hair right now, and I was planning on using a little bit of volumizing tonic afterwards, and today I did not put in any cutting lotion, probably because my hands are extremely dry and I don't want it to be too slippery.
We have so many friends watching from around the globe. We have our friend Mr. Christian Hayden watching, and Tracy Newton, so we thank you guys for tuning in. And lots of love coming in about the haircut, and some people want a quick recap because they're joining in.
All right, so I'll finish off this last section and then I'll spin Sydney round so that you can see what I've done so far. But right here, all I'm doing, and you could do this technique either wet or dry. Sometimes I find that when I'm working from shorter to longer on the inside of a layer, like a concave, I like to do it dry just because it's easier for the hair to glide through my fingers. But to recap, what I've done so far is I started in center back with I'd say about a 3-inch section clipped out of the way of Sydney's previous haircut. In here, I started through center back, working from center to the outside, over directing to the previous to create a slightly graduated triangular shape. And what that's going to do for Sydney is just to give her a little bit more lift in her profile. And then from there, I came around to the front, and I started my first section here, which is a traveling guideline where I'm working to the previous until I intersect with my last section at the back.
So a couple people wanted to know, they saw a braid.
So the braid was where I had the hair clipped up at the back. And why I used a braid and not a clip is sometimes I like the texture that a braid leaves me with. Whereas a clip, I get a clip mark. And you could use a clip. I just have a tendency that with a braid, it gets the hair up and out of the way.
And so some people are asking about this technique. Could you slide cut this concave that you're working on right now? Like, could you slide it as well?
Absolutely. You could slide cut, you could, why I'm not slide cutting today is I find when I'm working like a technique like this, I have control in the left hand to keep the length. Whereas when I'm sliding, I really have to be mindful of the pressure that I'm using. So for me, I just feel like I have a little bit more control. But yes, by all means, you could go ahead and you could slide cut.
So lots of love coming in, people saying how much they like your hair, that it looks like a Linda variation on the 90s. So lots of nice compliments about you.
That's a nice compliment for my videographer and very good friend and talented educator, Tristan, who's behind the camera. And I'm looking for another haircut, please, Tristan, soon. That would be great. And I'm just about to meet up with the last section here. So Tristan, if you want to come in nice and close. So when I'm over directing, what I'm looking for is basically that I've run out of hair, which I have. And if I was to take a horizontal section and look at it from the top, I would basically see a very large point. And that's because this piece has been over-directed this piece, and this piece has been over-directed to here. So why did I decide to use that method instead of slide cutting? Is simply because I feel like I have more control. And I'm just gonna do a little check to make sure that this is collapsing in nice and tight on Sydney. Because when I talk about, or when I look at someone's bone structure, I don't like to talk about ideals because I feel like there's really no such thing as ideal anymore. And we see it in sport. Certain body types are going to be more ideal for maybe a certain, long distance runners have a different body than sprinters, but all of the bodies are important. And I feel like with Sydney, she asked me, she goes, do you think this is going to work with my face shape? And I said, your face is gorgeous. It doesn't matter what I do. So I think it's really important that if we're confident in what we're doing, we can go ahead and make the right decisions for our guests. So I'm going to stand in front.
So we have lots of people. We have lots of people that are shouting out to you. We have Tracy Sakositz tuning in. Hey Tracy, how's it going?
Hey Tracy, thanks for checking it out. And so on this side, it's a little bit tricky. So I'm going to stand in front and I'm going to come towards me with my fingertips pointing down. And I always check for balance by picking up a little piece from the opposite side. And I know we all have a favorite side of cutting hair.
So lots of people saying they can't wait to see it finish. What's the name of this haircut for people who are tuning in? What again were we calling this haircut?
So for those of you tuning in, thank you so much for watching. This is my model Sydney, and the name we got, it's Modern Mullet, and that actually came from bouncing the idea off of Sydney. We said, what do you like better, shag or mullet? And she goes, mullet. And so I think really when you're creating looks, not just for models, like Sydney is a student here at the school, so if she doesn't like her hair, I'm gonna see her every day, and we're gonna work on it until she does, but fingers crossed, I think we're good. I think it's really important to get to know your guest if you can. Like I know when I go ahead and I cut a new client's hair, I always try to really get to know them. And with the ability with social media, we can look at their photos on Facebook. We can look at their photos on Instagram and really kind of get to know what they're like outside of them just coming into the salon. So I'm doing the same thing on this side that I did on the other, where I've got my fingertips pointing down and I'm removing a little bit more weight just here on the parietal ridge. And then what you're seeing is I'm slowly elevating with my left hand, and my right hand is really just cutting. So it's my left that's doing all of the work. And as long as I've practiced my scissor handling, my right hand really gets a break.
So why are you standing in the front on this side and in the back on the other side?
So very good question. So I wish I could cut hair with both hands. It'd be a little more expensive because I'd have to buy 2 sets of scissors, right? Hear me, people out there? Scissors are expensive. But for me, what I'm trying to achieve is a really short piece of hair. So my angle goes from very short to long. If I was to stand this way, it would be tricky because my fingertips naturally want to point downward. And I'd also be cutting into the hair. So from where I want the longer tips, I'd be going into the shorter tips. So what I do to make it more similar to the first side is I stand in front, but then I have to be mindful that I'm over directing. And so how I'm making sure that I'm walking towards the back is I'm slowly moving my body to the back of Sydney's haircut. The other thing about standing in front, what I like about it is I can check and I can look at my guest to see how they're doing. Because I don't know, I think for most hairstylists, we maybe don't discuss it in school, but I think it's really important to not only do your consultation in the beginning, but to sort of ask questions along the way. Ask your guest, how does it feel? Do you like how it's looking? But to bear in mind that sometimes it's like cooking and things in the middle don't always look so beautiful until you're about done. But thank you so much for tuning in. I am a huge believer of education. I love how accessible education is nowadays. I think it's incredible what Hairbrained has been able to do. I love their podcasts. I'm someone that has to commute to work, so I definitely always listen to my podcasts. And in addition to that, it's such an amazing tool for not just us as hairstylists, but to give our clients. Like for them to leave the salon, and I have a YouTube channel, it's called Morgan Roy Beauty. If you'd like to, you can go ahead and subscribe. But I tell my guests, if they don't know how to flat iron curl, instead of them finding someone else on the internet, and I'm not sure what they're learning, I go ahead and I tell them, like, check it out right here. I go through the steps of what you need to do to flat iron curl your hair properly.
So our good friend Darlene wants to know if you would do this on textured hair.
So very good question. Thanks for asking, Darlene. Shout out to one of our amazing and talented educators here at the Aveda Institute Toronto. Sorry, I'm a little biased. But for textured hair, absolutely. I think what you need to consider with textured hair is that your whole shape is going to expand. So I know for a one length technique on straight hair, it's going to lay very flat to the body. The moment I put that on curly hair, it's just going to expand and get bigger. I did talk to Sydney. Sydney does have wavy hair. She has a tendency to let her hair air dry. So we knew that this would be something that if she let air dry, it would sit nice and flat to her head and bone structure, but still complement her. So yes, on curly hair, for someone that's open to something that's a bit more aggressive, for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the top, but let me recap the back first. So to get this started, I started off with about a 3-inch section that was horizontal that I had braided out of the way instead of using a clip. From there, from center back, I worked previous to previous with graduation on either side to create slight triangular graduation in the back. Then I came around to the front and I started right here at the temple, creating a guideline that was working from very short to longer, and I slowly walked all the way to my last section of the piece in the back, creating a corner on either side of Sydney's haircut.
So a few people wanting to know where you got your clips, what kind of scissors do you use?
Okay, so for clips, I love the YS Park clips. I have a tendency to buy the gold ones, but they're all good, as well as the YS Park comb. And I feel like it's really important when you're choosing your tools that you don't use anything that's too big. The head is only so large, and so when I see people using very large tools, It makes me think of someone drinking soup with a ladle. It would just get really messy and hard to get, the soup in your mouth. So when I look at people that use very large tools to cut hair, I wonder, do they cut themselves? Do they find it hard to move the hair around? Because I have pretty small hands, so I like to use smaller tools. And I also look to my role models and my mentors, and I look to see what tools they use. And if they tell me that they're amazing, I love it when I get the opportunity to talk to Gerard, and I say, what type of scissors do you think I should be using? I love the B-Max. I think they're a great scissor. So now that I've got that wet down.
Lots of people joining in and watching.
So from here, I'm going to section off at the apex. So looking to see at Sydney's head, where's the highest point? And sorry, I'm going to section at the crown because I want to make sure that I've layered the crown short enough that it gets supported by the graduation that's sitting below.
What kind of water bottle is that?
Oh. From my good buddy, Tristan Morrison, I've got this wonderful harebrained water bottle. So if you need a really beautiful water bottle, this is the go-to. Okay, so now I'm going to be working over my fingers. I was asked before why I worked in the palm of my hand or under my fingers, and I explained that what that creates is a flatter line. By working over my fingers, what I can do is I can actually create something that sits a little bit rounder just by bending my fingers slightly. And what this will do is it'll follow the round of Sydney's head. And again, I'm going to use probably one of my favorite shapes, which is triangular. So you're going to see my body position is going to stay the same so that my hands or my fingertips can be pointing downward. But all I'm doing is I'm combing away from me. So I'm looking to make sure that I see the spine of the comb. Because I think one thing that we do habitually as hairdressers is we tend to really overcomb our work. And I teach here at the Aveda Institute. I teach 2 days a week, and I love being a part of education. Sydney, my model today, she's actually a student here. And I have to say, one of the most energizing things that I think hairstylists can do is teach and be a mentor. So if you feel like you need something to inspire you throughout your salon week, I would highly recommend, check out your local school. See if you can, do a demo for them. Get to know your new up-and-coming hairdressing professionals. So on the opposite side, my body is in the same place. The only thing that changes is this time when I'm combing, I want to make sure to see the teeth of the comb. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the first side and the second side the same. So you can see my graduation is just sitting below my finger. And then when I go to comb, I'm just elevating and really using that round of my fingertip.
So lots of people saying how much they love how you've modernized this, and it's just kind of sitting really nice on Sydney. Lots of people tuning in, so when we're done this, maybe we can do a recap. Sydney, a turn to the front here and recap our sectioning.
All right, well, why don't I'll recap the back. So for this modern mullet, we talked with Sydney, made sure that she felt comfortable with everything that was going to go on. I had about a 3-inch section that I had braided away, and that's where you're seeing her previous haircut, or her length from her previous haircut. From there, I graduated, a triangular graduation, meaning my guideline was in the center, and I progressively got a little bit longer towards the outside, and I stopped at the mastoid here. I did the same thing on the opposite side, of course checking for balance along the way, but this is really disconnected from that bottom piece. And then working along to the side, I came in with a concave. So working very short and over directing to the previous until I met back up with that little bit of graduation on the side. Doing the same thing on the opposite side. And so if you've just tuned in, all I've finished completing is the layering that's sitting in the crown of Sydney's hair. And then I just have to work onto the top. So for that, I'm going to do something a little different, where I'm going to stand so that my fingertips are towards the front of Sydney's head. And I'm actually going to work shorter along the front to slightly longer in the back. Because as I mentioned before, Sydney's quite petite, so if I can build a little bit of height in her haircut, that's still modern. We're not talking, like Dolly Parton hair. I'm going to try to do that by making sure that I've planned out my haircut properly. I do love Dolly Parton though. So if there's anyone that's near Dollywood that would love for me to come and teach, I would love to come and teach you. Because that's something that I think all of us educators love to do, is definitely meet new people and see what's happening locally in your city. And so I'm just going to start with my first section here, right at the front. And I'm going to establish, and Sydney and I had spoke, and she said that she was totally open to a micro fringe or something a little shorter. And I've had the luxury of getting to know Sydney over the past couple of weeks to get to know what she likes. Because I really think that's more or less how we get lucky with our haircuts, is if we really get to know our clients. So you can see as I was working along the back, I did meet up with the piece that was sitting in the crown at the back.
So we have a question coming in from Tracy. What would you say the difference is between a mullet and a shag?
So thank you for your question, Tracy. And I really think the difference between a mullet and a shag is a mullet I feel like is slightly more aggressive, meaning it's going to be shorter in lengths than what a shag would. But I think there really is no strong definition. So if you have a guest that hates the word mullet but loves to refer to her hair as a shag, I feel like call it a shag. But if they hate the word shag, then call it a mullet. But if there's anyone on the hairbrain community that's watching, please, if you know what the difference is, please let us know. Tristan and I would love to know, and I'm sure so would Sydney.
So why don't you talk about how important it is, like the suitability for picking this for somebody, because I think a lot of people are kind of out there looking, saying, when would you use this on somebody? And so I think suitability is key to kind of look at for a haircut like this.
Absolutely. And one of the most important things that I think, actually Sydney and I were talking about this, and I was saying, you know what, Sydney, I still love cutting like long round layers and just trimming the ends and giving a woman a beautiful blow dry and knowing that she's going to feel amazing about her haircut. So I really think most of it is actually removing first yourself from what you're doing and knowing that what you're creating is going to be worn by your guest. And so if you can establish sort of who your guest is, what does she do, what does she need to do in the morning to get ready. I know for myself even, I've learned what works for me by having so many different haircuts, and I've really had the privilege of being able to, grow my hair out numerous times so that I could learn from that experience and figure out, okay, when I'm growing out, a pixie, how often do I need to have it cut? And when I'm having it cut, do I need it to be cut into a bob, or do I want to grow it out into a shag or a mullet? So I think your own personal experience definitely helps, but I think it's really important that you connect with your guest. Like I was saying earlier with social media, it's amazing because we can actually get into our clients' photo albums. You know, if you want to know what is their lifestyle, ask to see, hey, can I see a few pictures of you that you've posted on Instagram or Facebook? Or you have a Pinterest account. Can I see how you like to decorate your home? And then also to, you know, check in, make sure your guest is loving what they have done. Whenever I've cut a new client's hair, I always make sure they have my business card. I make sure that they can contact me on Instagram, and I want to know, is it working for you? Because if it's not, then come on in and let me adjust it.
Okay, so what are you doing with the haircut?
So for the top, I started through the very front, and I've kept my fingers in the same direction the whole time, and that's because I'm cutting Sydney's fringe the shortest. And from there, I'm working ever so slightly longer towards the crown. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna build up a little bit of length in Sydney's crown. I'm working just through the top, and again, the same way that I did through the back, I'm just controlling through my combing to make sure that I'm getting a flat shape across the top. So if I go ahead and cross-check, I wanna make sure that I'm seeing a flat line. So just checking all the way through. And I know that by keeping my over direction consistent, I will be able to go through and make sure that I am getting that nice flat shape across the top. So even with Tristan standing right in front of me, what you'll see is I'm combing in the same way, but I'm just combing that hair away from myself ever so slightly towards the guideline. So I'm not combing on both sides, just to ensure that I'm getting the right over direction.
Lots of support out there from the Hairbrained community.
Well, thanks, Hairbrained. I'm almost on my last section here because I did go ahead and I cut shorter pieces below or at the parietal ridge on Sydney. So I'm just gonna go in. And I think the other way to keep a shape modern is to have elements of disconnection. I think what we've learned along the way through hairdressing is not everything needs to connect in. I think one of my big sort of moments of hairdressing was realizing that a fringe or bangs are disconnection. You know, how many of us actually cut someone's fringe and then take it all the way through? Rarely, if ever, unless they want sort of that haircut.
So we got lots of nice things. Jahari saying one of the things he loves about Hairbrained is the diversity of the educators and the haircuts. And we definitely agree. Hairbrained does have a really diverse group of people that, you know, spend their time trying to give back to the community. We got Jules saying how much she loves Hairbrained. How talented.
All right, so just gonna clean up Sydney a little bit here before I refine. And I am gonna go in with the diffuser. Sydney's hair dries nice and quick. And I'm gonna be using the Aveda Volumizing Tonic. Why I like Aveda Volumizing Tonic is it's nice and shiny. It gives a little bit of hold, but not too much hold. And I don't know, Sydney, if you can see yourself in the mirror there. But hopefully she's smiling. And I really want to just emphasize Sydney's natural curl. So by using the Volumizing Tonic and a diffuser, it'll really simulate what she's going to be doing at home, where she told me she mostly just lets her hair air dry. But I know that with cold Canadian winters, on occasion we need to use a diffuser to get things dry faster. And I'm just going to use my fingers ever so slightly to just keep the hair in place. But thanks again, everyone, for tuning in this modern mullet on Sydney. And I do think it's important, and it's been amazing, the quality of educators and guest artists that Hairbrained has had on. I know that I have the alert set to my phone, and I get lucky every now and then. I'll be on my lunch, and I'll be able to catch a Hairbrained live. And yes, there is, I would say, like quite a bit of diversity. I think it's amazing to see across the country all the different haircuts and the different approaches that people have around hair. And I'm just working across. Sydney told me she doesn't really like to part her hair, so I'm trying not to keep it in one place for too long so that she can move it around. Another amazing thing that's happening right now is we're starting to see, or we have been seeing, curl, texture, people's natural texture in hair. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that we have products that can control the cuticle of the hair. So guests are no longer really concerned about having frizzy hair, because there's a lot of product that will create shine and even, smooth down the cuticle. So there's just a tiny bit of moisture in there. And from here, I think it's really about suitability. So I like to change my perspective. I've been working sort of a lot behind Sydney. I've worked a little bit beside her. At one point, I was on the side of her, but I haven't gotten right in front of her yet. And I always tell my students that their last check should really be getting right into their client's space and get right in front of them. Because when Sydney goes home, she's not gonna stand behind a chair to look at herself. She's gonna walk right up to the mirror the same way that I would, or that you would as a hairstylist, and she's gonna take a look. So I think it's really important for us as hairstylists to change our perspective. And we're doing something that not a lot of people are doing. Like, we're allowed to get into our clients' personal space.
So lots of support. We have Charisse from our Thatch and Fringe salon up supporting you, and nice to see you online, Charisse, at Hairbrained. We have so many people sending their support from the community.
Well, thank you, everybody. I know that I constantly feel inspired by people that I've taught along the way. Tracy, Charisse, people that I've even actually never connected with, but I've been able to follow them on Hairbrained, on Instagram. I just feel like we're so lucky as hairstylists right now to have amazing, wonderful tools like, Hairbrained. And so if you can't, make it to a show, you can always see the show online. So just refining. And I'm just gonna clean Sydney up a little bit. We know how uncomfortable it is to sit with hair all over our faces. Mind you, I'm sure as hairstylists, you've all gone home with a bunch of hair on your face that's not yours. I know on occasion I've gone out for dinner and there's been hair in my food, but I checked to make sure it didn't fall off me first. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. Tristan?
So why don't you tell us kind of a little bit about what you're thinking about when you're customizing a fringe?
So really what I'm looking at when I'm customizing a fringe is I do want to pay attention to looking at the face shape and face shape balance and where do you want to highlight. So for a lot of women, we love our cheekbones. And why our cheekbones are so important is because they really house the most important asset on the face, which is your eyes. So if I draw more attention in through here, I know it's going to be complementary. One thing that I had discussed with Sydney was she had these strong sideburns, and at one point we had sort of thought about placing them in through the side like this. But I said to her, I go, you know, as someone that has a rounder face shape, I find that if I keep the hair sort of sitting up and on my cheekbone, even through styling, I get a nice lift running through. So I don't think it's always about covering up maybe something that you're a little self-conscious of. It's almost exposing other areas to minimize. And I think as far as like fringe length goes, I know that parting, we don't know if Sydney's fringe or forehead starts here, or it's here, or it's here. So it's a really elongating way to cut hair. So with a fringe, the shorter I go, the more the proportions are going to become elongated. And with her dark hair, it does create a pretty strong horizontal. So I know that I can probably take the fringe up quite high before it really starts to elongate or stretch Sydney's face, because she has such high cheekbones and such a nice little narrow chin. But I'm pretty much finished. I'm just going to look to make sure that there's no weight that needs to be removed. And I think if anything, just through the crown, where I had my two sort of over directions come together, I really just want to check to make sure that there's no extra length. And by creating a tiny bit of texture in the crown, I know that Sydney will be able to style this in various ways. If I take out too much though, it's going to fall flat and she's not going to get that height in her haircut that I tried so hard to get. So let me recap as I clean off Sydney here. I started in the back of Sydney's haircut. So starting in the back, and I didn't actually cut anything in here. This was all of Sydney's previous haircut. So it's about a 3-inch section that's horizontal. Above that, I worked triangular graduation, and then came around through the side, so completely disconnected, and worked a piece that worked from shorter to longer, that I slowly worked towards my last section at the back, creating a very strong corner, which you can see here, that's just kind of hugging and giving a little bit more shape to Sydney's profile. From there, I sectioned off at the crown and worked this time over my fingers to create a beautiful round layer, over directing to the previous to create something that's going to sit with the bottom, so triangular, and then coming around to the front, starting at the fringe and working from a little bit shorter to the length that was sitting in the crown, and then working previous to previous to create a nice square shape running through the top. And then just detailing with a little bit of pointing along the fringe, and then diffusing naturally, so it'll be pretty close to how Sydney's going to be able to wear her hair at home. And for styling options, so before Sydney leaves, I would probably show her that if she wants to wear it even more aggressive, she can go ahead and tuck her hair behind her ears, and then she has a different look. If she wants to go even a step further, you know, say it's holiday, she could even twist that hair out of the way and shock all of her friends thinking that she has a short haircut. So I think it's also important that we show our guest the importance or sort of different ways that they can go ahead and style their hair. So that's all for me. Thank you so much, Hairbrained community. If you want to find out more, you can always find me on Instagram or on Facebook under Morgan Roy Beauty. Thank you so much for tuning in.